am struggling. I need to know the answer to this question. I was looking into the sky and I was saying, Father in heaven, why did Jesus have to suffer this brutal death? Why did you require it? Or how does he forgive my sins because of that? A very sacred thing happened. Hello again, this is Stan Winchester. This is my, I believe my fifth video in this series of Miracles from the Ashes. Jesus saved a sinner like me. In this video, I'm going to talk about being called to serve as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I remember, well, I came home from Rick's. I got a job at another grocery store. By this time, I was they call it a journeyman checker. I was in the Retail Clerks Union, and I was a journeyman checker. I still had my 38 Chiv coupe. I also had a really cool 53 Chevy convertible that I absolutely loved as well. It was more of a jalopy, but it was fun. I had so much fun in that car. And so I worked for a local grocery store and worked to save money for my mission. I got all my papers in, and I was called to serve in the France Toulouse mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was to report to the language training mission, then the LTM. In May of 1977, they had just opened the new LTM. The missionaries right before me had been on the BYU campus, and so I was one of the first groups to go through. Not the first group necessarily, but one of the first. And it was really an amazing place. It was wonderful. I loved it there. In the language training mission, I had to learn a language. Now remember, I wasn't a good English student. I had to learn French. Now, I learned to love it. It's a beautiful language. I learned to love the people. But I really struggled learning this language. I struggled even more learning the lessons because I felt like I was almost memorizing a bunch of sounds that apparently had meaning. They had meaning, but they weren't. I didn't know the meaning of a lot of them. I did read the Book of Mormon for the first time through and through in the Book of Mormon in the language training mission. I remember the Spirit bearing witness to me in 3rd Nephi. I believe it's chapter 17 where Jesus weeps with the people, and I wept, feeling his great love. It was a sacred experience. I remember the first vision, and I remember the Spirit bearing powerful witness to me that Joseph Smith is the prophet of the restoration, that our Father in heaven and the Lord Jesus Christ did in fact come to him, and teach him, instruct him, and prepare him to be the prophet of the restoration. Them, together with all the other heavenly visits that he received, truly made him into the prophet that he truly is. I struggled in the LTM greatly. I felt like my brain had been through a meat grinder. I had never studied so hard in my life. It was long, hard days of studying. And I did actually learn a bit of French, and I still remember a little bit, though it would probably be sacrilege for me to try to speak French because I butcher it so terribly. I love France. I remember knocking on my first door. It was scary. But I got to where I could do a door approach. Okay. Um, I absolutely loved my first companion. He was a great trainer. He was a good friend. Well, transfer day came, and I'm looking at the transfers, and I see Elder Rick Ross Kelly, Pocatello, Idaho. And I was like, what? My trainer was going home. And I was like, oof. And so I wished him well, and I was excited to get a new companion. My new companion was not excited about me. He had some favorite pet names that he called me. He called me a jock. He called me a stud. And then he proceeded to tell me how he hated jocks and studs. You know, I had friends in high school. I did do some sports. I was never very good at it. I mean, I did okay. I mean, just mainly because I never really had the chance. I played a little bit of football my sophomore year, and I was like the B squad on the junior varsity. I mean, yeah, I was great. But I had fun. I had fun. And the other thing was he was really hard on me. He often called me stupid. That I'll never learn this language. I'll never learn these discussions, and because I was depressed, I wouldn't get out of bed. I would just, I was actually, yeah, I wouldn't get, I didn't get, I was getting these headaches, and I would pass out, and I ran in the back of a car one time on my bicycle. I was just out of it. It was so hard. I think the problem was he reminded me too much of my dad. He was really hard on me. One day he told me, he said, Elder Winchester, we're going to be tracting at 9 o'clock this morning, so you're going to get out of bed. I said, no, we're not. If you don't get out of bed, I'm going to pull you out of bed. I told him, I said, don't do it. You'll be sorry if you do. He grabs me by my right foot, and he pulls me out of the bed. Now, you have to see our missionary beds. They were pretty amazing. We had these lattice of springs and a foam mattress between another lattice of springs, and they were wired together, and then we had a foam mattress on top. They were just, yeah, first class. I mean, really comfy. Well, when he did that, he actually pulled the bed, kind of came apart with me, and so, you know, and then I hit my elbow on a hardwood floor. And I got up mad. Whew. I was mad. And I'm not proud of this. In fact, if I could see him again, I'd apologize for this. Because there was no excuse for this. Now, he was bigger than me. I'm 6'2", and I was about 210 pounds at the time, probably. Maybe 215, I don't know, somewhere in there. But I was well built. I was strong. I was fast. And I picked him up and threw him on the ground. And punched him several times. Broke his nose, apparently. I don't know, there was blood coming everywhere, but yeah, probably broke his nose. The other elders came in, separated us. And mission president obviously gets involved. President Broshinsky, George Broshinsky. He was a really neat man. I remember him a bit. I don't have, you know. I was only out for 5 months, but they separated us, and it was decided that because of my depression and because of my the blackouts, so I'd go into the hospital. And I spent a week in the hospital. And sometime, I can't remember, it was probably right before I went to the hospital. I got my third companion, and he had no idea what to do with me. I went from being this super excited missionary wanting to share the gospel with everybody, to one that didn't want to get out of bed. And I remember one day I said, I'm going home. I have enough to buy a ticket home, so I'm just going to go home. And he wouldn't let me out of the apartment. He kept walking in front of me. I said, oh, please just, please. And finally I think I picked him up and just gently set him aside, because he was a good guy. I wasn't going to hurt him. I had no intentions of hurting him. And so I took all my suitcases and walked out to the bus stop. And he's like, doesn't know what to do. He's just like, so he runs in, he calls the mission president, and then he runs out and talks to me, and he runs back and talks to the mission president some more. And ended up convincing me to take a train to Toulouse the next day. We were in Bordeaux. To take a train to Toulouse and to talk to him and take it from there. I get to the mission home, and I talk to our mission president, and he's talked to then Elder Monson, and they suggested I phone home, which I do, and I tell them what's going on. Again, my parents are pretty new in the church. I really don't know what my dad's feelings are about the church, but they encouraged me to come home. It's weird because there were times when I thought my dad was proud of me from being a missionary. It seemed that way, but he talked me to come home, and I said okay. And so the next day I flew home. I received an honorable release, had a good letter from my mission president to my stake president, and I had an honorable release. One thing I've learned about conversion is it is a process, and as you can see with my story so far, I've struggled a lot. This story is important to understand how I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ the way I do today. It was a process. It's been a long process. And I just forgot actually one of the most important things that happened to me while I was on my mission. So with my second companion, I'm struggling with this question. And basically how I posed it at the time was, why did Jesus have to suffer such a horrible, cruel, brutal, agonizing death? And why did God require it? That was my question. I struggled with it. I had talked to my mission president about it, like at a zone conference. I've talked about with other missionaries. Sometimes missionaries would leave me notes with answers, and none of them touched my question. But to be fair, I realized I didn't know how to pose the question. It was a question that was deep. You see, ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to know how things worked. At a year and a half old, I took apart a high chair. I remember at 3 or 4 years old taking apart an alarm clock. I had a cousin that had a baby bin alarm clock that used to work. Yeah, I took it all apart. When living in California, I would take apart tricycles and made some of the first big wheels. Before big wheels were a thing. I would make choppers out of other bikes. I would do all kinds of things. I was just always taking things apart and want to put them back together and figure out how things worked. And I've always been that way. Well, the atonement of the Lord Jesus Christ is no different. I wanted to know what his suffering had to do with payment for my sins. I could not see, and again, I told you in Rick's college, I took a physics class that I don't think I opened the textbook once. Not once. And I think I got a B plus in that class. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was a B plus. It was a good grade. I mean, especially for one that never opened the book, because I would just listen to the lectures and everything made sense. Oh yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, I understand. Okay, that makes total sense. Sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great. With a mind that worked that way, I wanted to understand how his suffering paid for my sins. I could not see the connection. So one day I'm on my balcony. I was looking out over the balcony. It was a beautiful day in the fall. And when I had this companion that clearly didn't like me. And I am struggling. I need to know the answer to this question. I was looking into the sky and I was saying, Father in heaven, why did Jesus have to suffer this brutal death? Why did you require it? Or how does he forgive my sins because of that? A very sacred thing happened. And it's interesting to note how opposition can happen. At the same time, miracles are happening. Because my companion saw me praying vocally, looking up into the sky. My eyes are open. I'm gesturing with my hands. And he says, Elder, you're not supposed to pray that way. And I just thought to myself, really? Because I had just received an incredible answer to my prayer. The first time in my life I'd ever experienced anything like it. This is what happened. It was like a voice in my head. And it said that a righteous judgment might come upon the children of men. I was like, wow. But it was more than that. Because with those words, I knew what they meant. They meant that there wouldn't be anybody that would be able to say, but Lord, you weren't there. It was really hard. I didn't have another choice. What I realized that day was that we'll stand before the Lord. And because of his suffering, he's able to see into our souls and our being in a way that couldn't have happened otherwise. I learned later on in life that I believe that he actually can see and feel through our eyes and ears and hands and heart and mind. He knows us. And because he knows us perfectly and intimately, he'll be able to judge us perfectly. And so for those that are striving to follow him, I'll say, that have messed up and fallen down as many times as I have, maybe more, but if they get back up with their hand in his, he'll say, welcome home, child. Welcome home. Welcome home. And with that, I'll say goodbye. The next video in this series will be Crash and Burn, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. So until then, I hope you have felt something as I've shared my story. And I'll say goodbye for now. Thank you for watching.